This is Dr. Mirjam Knörnschild. Mirjam is the head of the Behavioral Ecology and Bioacoustics Lab at the Museum of Natural History in Berlin and research associate of the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in Panama. She's an expert in acoustic communication, cognition, learning, and social behavior of bats. Mirjam conducts most of her studies on wild bats in Central America. She is particularly interested in the structure and function of bat song, and I'm really interested to hear about bat song. So over to you, Mirjam.
Hi, my name is Mirjam. And in this Wildlife Acoustics webinar, I'm going to talk about bat song. The most commonly accepted definition of song that we currently have is one of form and function. So for an animal vocalization to be classified as song, it has to be a sexually selected vocalization, so one used in the context of rival deterrence or mate attraction, and it has to have a complex temporal and spectral structure. Some bat species sing as well, and before I talk about bat song in any greater detail, I'd like to briefly walk you through a taxonomy of vocal signals produced by bats. So of course you all know that bats produce echolocation calls, they're sometimes also called echolocation pulses, and that they have social vocalizations on top of that. When we think about echolocation calls, it's important to remind ourselves that these are naturally selected vocalizations that have a simple but actually quite variable structure. What you see here is an echolocation call sequence starting with search calls and then ending in approach calls with a final buzz of a European bat species, Pipistrellus pipistrellus. And there you can actually see that each signal is quite simple, but taken as a whole, these echolocation calls have a variable structure. When we think about social vocalizations, we can further differentiate them into calls and songs. And I brought you two different examples of social calls. The top one are fairly tonal, almost constant frequency vocalizations. They are from a southern African bat species, Taphotzous mauritianus, and then the second example is more noisy screech-like calls from the Egyptian fruit bat. And social calls can either be naturally selected or sexually selected vocalizations, but they have a comparatively simple structure when compared to the songs. Songs, on the other hand, are always sexually selected by definition, and they have a comparatively complex spectral-temporal structure. And the example I brought you here is again from a European species, Pipistrellus natucii, and that's one song motif the males produce to attract mates and to deter rivals. I personally think that bat song is a really, really interesting phenomenon, but sadly it's also a rather understudied one. What you see here on the left-hand side is a phylogeny of the recent extant bat families, and it's not important really to read all the details or know all the names, but just as a visual impression for you, the families that are highlighted here in blue are the ones in which we have examples of song, whereas the families in white are the ones for which we don't have any evidence for song so far. And my main point being the families in gray are the ones that are simply not studied at all. And when we move away from the family level and actually go to the species level, it's looking even darker. So we currently have, my last count was 1,439 species. We have social vocalizations, any social vocalizations, not just song, for less than 100 of these, over 1,400 species. And within these roughly 100 species, song has been described for around 30 species. So I'm arguing that song is actually not rare at all in bats. It's just very unstudied. So in the next few slides, I'm going to introduce you to the diversity of bat song around the world. And I'm always contrasting a bat song example with a bird song example to just highlight similarities between songbirds and bats. So the first example is an African species, the hard-nosed bat Cardioderma cor. You see a picture of the bat here, and here the visual representation of its song is frequency over time. The song is fairly simple. It consists of only 2 different syllables, and at least to my ears it can be compared to a simple songbird song, for example the song of the common chiffchaff. You see a spectrogram here also has only 2 syllables that are repeated after one another. So why are males of this species singing, and where are they singing? You can already see that in the video down here. Males sing while being perched in trees, and they sing to defend foraging territories. What you see here, this is work done by Grace Marsh and Mike Smotherman, is the territories of 4 different males, color-coded, and males defend their territory borders acoustically by producing song, just like songbirds do. The next example comes from Central America and the southern US. This is the Mexican free-tailed bat, Tadarida brasiliensis. It's a very different song, very dense, very fast, consisting of a lot of pulsed components here in the end, and I think its acoustic impression can be best compared to, for instance, the song of the barn swallow, which also has like a really pulsed, harsh, kind of like brrt component in the end. So why do Mexican free-tailed bats sing, and where? In contrast to the hard-nosed bats, Mexican free-tailed bats do not only sing to defend their roosting territory, they also sing to attract mates, females, to their territory. What you see here in this video is a male Mexican free-tailed bat singing and also doing a wing flapping display to attract females to its territory that is visually visible behind here in this little pouch. And the songs are also individually distinct. So this is work done by Kesey Bone. And the third example I brought you is from a European bat species. That's the Natusius pipistrelle, Pipistrellus natusii. And this species has a motif-like song structure, very distinct, also I think very beautiful one, that can, for instance, be compared to the song of the Eurasian wren, which you see down here. So why do male Natusius pipistrelles sing? They sing, in contrast to the other 2 species, not while being perched. They sing on the wing, and they do that, again, to defend their roosting territory and to attract females. We also know from work by Helena Jahelkova that songs are individually distinct, and we know from a playback study done by Ross and Racy that females actually prefer conspecific song and are attracted to a song playback. So here on the y-axis of this graph you see the number of echolocation calls as a proxy for bat activity, and then here you see the different songs of the different species that were broadcasted, Pipistrellus natusi and the 2 sympatric bat species, Pipistrellus pygmaeus and Pipistrellus pipistrellus, and then silence as a control, and you see clearly that females prefer conspecific song. And in the second half of my talk, I'd like to briefly introduce you to the research my lab has been doing for the last 15 years on the greater sac-winged bat, most particular the song of male sac-winged bats. So this is a small insectivorous neotropical species that is fairly diurnal as far as bats are concerned, and that we've been studying for quite a while now. Male song in Saccopteryx bilineata is comparatively easy to study because males actually sing every day throughout the whole year. So this is a neotropical species, meaning that the social groups stay together throughout the whole year. The social life is not interrupted by migration or hibernation. And as a consequence, males sing every day, but they sing, of course, most intensely during the mating season. And there are actually 2 different song types in this species. There is a song that we call the territorial song that is directed at male rivals in the same colony and also at dispersal females, so young females looking for a new colony. And then there is a courtship song that is directed at females in the same colony. And I brought you two examples here. I only brought you an excerpt, so a small bit out of a courtship song, because courtship songs in Saccopteryx bilineata are extremely long for bat vocalizations. They're on average 40 seconds long, but individual males have been recorded singing for up to an hour straight, like with song directed particularly at one specific female. So a very long bat vocalization. It's purely ultrasonic, and the song is organized in motifs, as you can see here in the top spectrogram. And then on the other hand, we have the territorial song, which is also fairly long for a bat vocalization, but much shorter than the courtship song, on average 1.5 seconds long. It's audible, at least the lower frequencies are, and it consists of these graded syllables that end up in these very harsh, noisy-like syllables here in the end. We call them buzz syllables that have this pulsed onset and then a small tonal component. We also know that these territorial songs are learned, which makes them really interesting for us to study. We know that pups learn to sing by listening to adult males in their colony. As I said earlier, it's a neotropical species, so the social groups stay together throughout the whole year, and that also means that pups, in contrast to a lot of temperate zone species, grow up with actually adult males around. So since these bats sing every day, the pups are exposed to male song at dawn and dusk throughout their ontogeny, and they learn to sing themselves by copying these adult males. And they're quite good at song production at an early age. What I brought you here are two examples. The lower spectrogram here is the song of an adult male, a Tudor male, if you will. And males produce these territorial songs at dusk and dawn, and fairly regular time points. And what you see here is a song version, a song rendition of an 8-week-old pup. And it still has trouble with this really pulsed components at the end of the song. But apart from that, it's a fairly good rendition, I think. And of course, they get even better with age. And by 12 weeks of age, when they are weaned, their songs are really adult-like. And we did a variety of different tests to show that these songs are actually learned, but I don't have time to present you the data here. As a consequence of this song learning, there are small copying errors. So when the pups are learning to sing, they don't copy the adults perfectly. They make small mistakes, if you will, and these copying errors accumulate into distinct regional differences, and we call these acoustic differences dialects. And in animal bioacoustics, with dialect we mean acoustic differences from animals belonging to different geographic regions or different populations. And dialects can either be maintained by cultural transmissions, or if it's learned vocalizations, like in the case of our Saccopteryx bats, but they can of course also be influenced by genetic factors, or they can be purely genetically determined, local adaptation, genetic drift, and so forth. And in the remaining bit of my talk, I'm going to give you one playback example to show you that territorial song dialects in Saccopteryx bilineata are actually not only something that we as researchers can detect, but they actually mean something for the bats. They're what we call functionally relevant. So what you see here on the left-hand side is a visual representation of how different song dialects between different regions actually are. So you see three colors, which is the what we call the local songs, or from the population in which we actually did the playback experiments, in two different foreign songs. And in this discriminant function signal space, spatial proximity is a proxy for acoustic similarity, meaning the tighter points cluster together, the more acoustically similar they are compared to other points. And you see that these three different colors representing three different populations cluster fairly well, even though there is some overlap. So we can say that just statistically speaking, they're regional song dialects. And then we designed a playback experiments in order to test that. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to play back for 3 minutes the local song dialect, then for 3 minutes the foreign song dialect from one location and then from the other location. And of course, we would do that in a randomized order. And we did that at 9 different locations, and these locations were suitable roosts, so trees in which our bats would normally roost, but that were not inhabited. And then we tried to capture approaching wild bats, and in our case females, with very small mist nets. So mist nets that were 2 by 2 meters square area, so like very small, placed directly in front of the speaker, and we were testing whether these songs would elicit phonotaxis, so approach behavior that was so strong that we would actually be able to capture these wild females, and whether the different dialects would be, attractive to different degrees to our bats. And the question behind all this is that we were asking ourselves, well, how do young females that need to disperse from their natal colony and find a new colony somewhere else to settle in for the rest of their lives, how do they actually find this colony in a tropical rainforest in which potentially every other tree could be a suitable roosting tree? And we thought, well, maybe these territorial songs are really loud. They're fairly low frequency for a bat vocalization, so they go as low as 7 kilohertz. So they're audible over quite a distance. Maybe dispersing females can actually use these territorial songs to find new colonies. And this is the situation we wanted to mimic in our playback. So I told you earlier, males sing at dusk and dawn. And at dawn, it's really a dawn chorus, like a bird song chorus. And this is exactly also the time during which the females fly back either to their natal roost or may check out a new roost somewhere in the area. And we tried to mimic that situation with our playback. And here is what we found. So the left side of the slide you already know. And what you see here on the right-hand side is our capture success over these 9 different playback trials when we played back local song or these 2 different controls, the foreign song. And what you can see here is that very clearly females preferred the local song, so the song they were familiar with, since we were able to capture dispersal females with our method, we never captured any males, only females, most of them dispersal females, some of them adult females. We can say that females actually can locate new colonies simply by listening to male song. So male song can actually be like an acoustic beacon that is, lighting the way, so to speak, for females to find new colonies. And we can also say that, yes, females strongly prefer local song over foreign song. And if you think one step further, that means then that song dialect borders can actually constitute dispersal barriers that hinder gene flow between populations. And that's something that we are currently working on. But I don't want to show you any more Saccopteryx data. I'd rather end my webinar with a plea for more studies on bat song. I've shown you this very sad relation earlier, that we have so many different bat species and we have so little information on their social vocalizations and even less information on the species song. And I really think we need more studies to fill that knowledge gap, because bat song is highly interesting. So here are some suggestions of what I think would help us in our quest to study bat song. It would be great if, by default, bioacoustic monitoring studies would also analyze social vocalization. At present, some studies do that, but the majority focuses on echolocation calls for very understandable reasons. But I think we're losing a lot of knowledge by ignoring the social vocalizations in the way that a lot of people are still currently doing. I also think to get more information on social vocalizations, recordings should concentrate on known roosts in addition to foraging areas, because you get a lot of social vocalizations, by recording at roosts, and it has the additional advantage that very often you know what species is in these roosts, and that makes, of course, your social vocalization library better because you have recordings on species level. And something else that I can only encourage everyone to do is, if you have any social vocalizations that haven't been described before, please, please, please report them to the community. I'm sure there is a ton of knowledge in the head of bat experts out there, everywhere in the world, but the community, the research community at large, cannot access that knowledge unless it's published in any form, as a short note, as an anecdotal observation, somewhere in as a report, anything. But it would really be great if all this knowledge that is out there is actually, put into writing so that people can access it. I also think that teamwork is of the essence. Teamwork between researchers, ecological consultants, and local bat enthusiasts is super important. For instance, we're currently studying song dialects of the party-colored bats, Vespertilium murinos, in 19 different European countries, and that's something like a single team anywhere would not be able to do. So teamwork is really going to help us close that knowledge gap on bat song that we currently have. And in the end, I'd like to thank you all for your attention and acknowledge my great team and my funding sources, and thank you for your attention.
Oh, thank you, Mirjam. That was a wonderful bat singing. Really, really fascinating. And I'm now never going to look at a bat social call in the same way again. Thanks.
Very cool. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks the speakers before me, and the great group of people contributing to the chat. This was really a lot of fun, even though it was very humbling to listen to a pre-recorded talk. Do I really sound like that? This is bad, like really bad.
No, you sounded wonderful, and
yeah.
lots of positivity in the chat and also on Twitter as well. So it's really good. Well, we have questions. They're flooding in. I know some of them you may have answered, so apologize if you have.
Fire away.
From a fieldwork standpoint, how are these social calls recorded? Acoustic recorders at colonies, that sort of thing? How do you go about recording them, basically?
It really depends on what we want to know. So sometimes when we want to record individual, bats singing, when we have, put color bands on the bats to identify them individually, then we actually sit there with the bats and, try to really use a highly directional microphone to pinpoint at specific individuals and only record them. But sometimes we only want to sample regional variants of song or something. So it doesn't matter that much if we record, the same individual reliably over and over again or not. So then we would use automatic devices. And for that, actually, wildlife acoustics, it's great because some of these songs are really low frequency. For example, the party color bats, they go as low as 10 kilohertz. And that, with a lot of recording devices, with microphones built in to either, completely suppress low frequency sounds or substantially, lower its amplitude, it's challenging because bat song spans such a broad spectrum. So it really depends on the species.
No, but yeah, wonderful. Do male bats also sing different songs when looking for females, and do some variations or adaptations to their song like birds or whales? Oh, sorry. So do they add variations? Sorry.
I would, it's a great question. I'd love to answer that. We don't have the data to really say that for sure right now, because bat song, and especially regional variants of bat song, is a fairly new field. So maybe if we have another, webinar or whatever we have in 10 years, we can maybe answer that. But at present, I think it's possible. I mean, bats have never really underwhelmed me in terms of what they can do with their vocal tract and with their larynx. So I think it's totally possible, but we can't say right now.
No, fair enough. For those of us not deep in the field, could you suggest some community resources to send example sounds to without needing to publish a peer-reviewed journal?
That's a good question, really. I mean, there is online bat libraries, for example, Cairo Vox. I posted that somewhere, I think, in the chat and also in the Q&A. That's a fairly new, just online library where, sort of like Say No Canto for birdsong, where people can just share recordings and contribute. And I think that's a great, very sort of like low hassle sort of way to share interesting recordings. And I mean, some of these recordings are really hard to get or rare to record, and I mean, I think it would be great if more people were sharing their recordings. And then of course there are animal sound archives, but they heavily focus on birdsong, and I really think bats could, I mean, we can probably not put the bird people out of business, but we can. We're not going down without a fight.
No, I think sharing of data is kind of crucial moving forward. Several related questions. At what point would it be classed as song rather than just a social call? For example, Pipistrellus nethusii, would you consider it a song even if only one of the three parts of the song is omitted, which regularly happens?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's also very hard to answer one, especially with the pipistrelles, because obviously very little in nature is really, a binary trait. It's either a call or a song, and that's categories we superimpose to just, basically with very few words what the other person is talking about. But this may not be what the bats are doing. And for instance, in the European pipistrelles, it's true that they have songs for, mate attraction and rival deterrence. And that's the males singing like in a very regular sort of like song flighty way or around roosts, during the mating season. But these songs are also recorded in a less stereotypic and shorter way throughout the year. And it's not clear if these are not then social calls also produced by females. So unless we put like tiny tags with microphones on male and female bats, we will probably just not know for sure. So that taxonomy that I said earlier is really just for us to organize stuff. It may not be, there may be a continuum of when something is, a call and can develop into a song because it's used in a more sophisticated way or more stereotypic, repetitive way or something.
We're getting the detector smaller, but the bats allowed to carry a phone.
But pipistrelles, you probably still need 2 or 3 to sort of like team up and carrying that. But I mean, everything gets smaller all the time. So I think battery weight is still the most pressing problem to solve.
Have you noticed courtship songs are at higher frequency than territorial songs for other species besides sac-winged bats?
Mm-hmm. I would expect this to be the case, but for most species, for most bat species, there's actually only one song type that is used in both contexts. So then we can't really say. Why I'm thinking that this makes sense is because territorial defense is often, like a long distance broadcast signal. Whereas, I mean, mate attraction might also be, but then courtship, when, the mate is already there in the vicinity, could, potentially have a lower amplitude. And of course, then also a higher frequency because it wouldn't suffer so much of acoustic attenuation.
And somebody's put you on the spot here for this one. With what certainty do you think you can identify the region an individual is from by looking at their song dialect?
Me, like if you play something, so I only showed you data for the Saccopteryx territorial song, and there it's really, that's the computer telling me. The bats can obviously do it in the field, but I can't. For the courtship song, they really have different syllables in different regions with like a different, amount of times each syllable occurs. So there I can do it visually, but my ears are actually really poor. So I prefer to like look at spectrograms. I'm actually not very good at here. So it's a constant embarrassment when I have to go like on a early morning bird walk, because people always assume I'm a bioacoustician. I should know all bird songs. I'm like, yeah, that's a blackbird, I hope.
I think if you just say it with confidence, just say it with the blackbird, fine.
But there are all these crazy shiny apps now that let your students identify the bird in real time, so they actually catch you if if you're overconfident. So I prefer to like keep it real and say like, yeah, I'm like 80% sure that this was a blackbird. Let's talk about bats. But to sort of like circle back a little bit. Again, I've never been underwhelmed. We know now that even in echolocation calls, like very comparatively simple signals, there is enough really just different voice feature information for bats to be able to discriminate, individuals. And our computers can do that too. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the bats could hear that instantly and say like, yeah, you're not from here, you sound foreign, or hey, you're, the population next door, basically.
Well, there's two questions actually related to that. Why do females prefer local songs and not foreign songs? Wouldn't they rather sort of mix the genes up a little bit?
Yeah. Also a great question. I mean, it seems that they want to mate with someone who almost but not quite sounds like their dad. And that's a little weird, right? But it may be that local dialects like co-evolved with other local adaptations that are actually advantageous. So that's one explanation why females may prefer to mate with local males, because they don't want to lose local specific adaptations that are like other adaptations that have nothing to do with song, that are beneficial and just co-evolved. But we really don't know. I mean, sometimes you could also think that maybe there is a novelty effect, that, something that sounds really foreign, but maybe hits on some sensory preference of the females is really something they're excited about. But at least in these bats, we haven't seen that yet.
And there's a question that keeps coming up, and I think you've answered it in the chat, but I think some people keep asking it. Do females ever sing?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? At present, we don't know. I would expect it maybe in species like the hard-nosed bats, where there is a strong pair bond and male and females, participate maybe in communal territorial defense, because that's what we actually find in songbirds. I mean, for years, the textbook knowledge was that only males sing. So whenever you hear a songbird and it's singing, it has to be a male, right? Because only male sings. And that's, of course, is, a circular logic. And then when people have been looking more thoroughly, and also in other countries than Europe and North America, it turned out that, female bird song is both more widespread and ancestral than male song. So I wouldn't be surprised if female bats also sing, but we just need more people studying them. And especially, the really interesting examples where there's like pair bonds, for instance, because there I could see a complete advantage of doing that. If you think about male and female gibbons that sing together to defend a territory, and the way how they synchronize their songs, their duets, is an indicator of how good their pair bond is. I could totally see this, being the case in certain bat species as well. We just haven't studied it yet.
Especially when you said earlier the way you're getting male bats that are defending a territory, it's kind of how territorial are the female bats, assuming they would want a territory to feed and everything else. So it fits in. Well, look, I wish we could carry on. I had one job, and it's to keep everybody to time, and I've messed that up completely. But it is so fascinating, and thank you so much for answering questions. If you for the last 5 minutes, if you want to keep putting out answers in the chat or in the Q&A, it would be really, really appreciated. But
sure, I'll do that.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And everyone who has questions, reach out to me. I'll just put my email address in the chat as well. And then, you can just contact me whenever you want to talk about bat song or other bat vocalizations. I'm always happy to do that. Thanks for having me.
Bat song. It's great. Thanks, Mirjam.
All right. Bye.